Belle Hartman was buttering toast when her husband told her their marriage was over. "I want a divorce," Daniel said, not even looking up from his coffee, his tone as casual as if he were commenting on the weather. "I can't keep doing this, Belle. I need a partner who actually contributes. A wife who doesn't work isn't the life I signed up for." Belle set the butter knife down slowly, the toast forgotten. She looked at her husband of 9 years, a man she had cooked breakfast for every morning, raised their daughter with, built a home alongside, and felt something inside her go very still and very quiet. "Okay," she said simply. Daniel blinked, clearly having expected more of a reaction. Before he could say anything else, the kitchen door swung open, and Belle's best friend Paige walked in, barefoot, wearing one of Daniel's dress shirts, her hair still tousled from sleep. Paige froze in the doorway, Daniel froze at the table, and Belle stood there in the middle of her own kitchen, staring at the two people she had trusted most in the world, understanding in one devastating instant that her marriage and her closest friendship had both been quietly rotting for who knew how long. "I'll get my things," Belle said, and walked upstairs, leaving both of them standing in stunned silence, waiting for an explosion that never came. What Daniel didn't know, what he had never once bothered to ask about in 9 years of marriage, was that his wife was not, in fact, the unemployed stay-at-home mother he'd just insulted in front of her toast. Belle had spent the last 6 years quietly building a remote consulting business from a small office upstairs that Daniel assumed was just where she kept her yoga mat and old scrapbooking supplies. She specialized in operational strategy for mid-sized firms, work she did almost entirely by video call and email while Daniel was at his own office, work that had, over time, grown into a business generating more than $500,000 a year. She hadn't hidden it out of deception. She'd simply learned, early in their marriage, that Daniel's ego bruised easily around the subject of money, and it had been easier to let him believe he was the primary provider, while she quietly built something entirely her own. With that income, she had paid off their mortgage 3 years ahead of schedule, using a separate account Daniel had never asked about, because Daniel, as it turned out, rarely asked her about anything at all. That evening, packing a bag in the guest room rather than face another night under the same roof as Daniel and Paige, Belle received an urgent email from her accountant, flagged for immediate attention. She almost didn't open it, given everything else happening that day, but something made her click through. What she found stopped her cold. Her accountant, reviewing shared financial accounts as part of routine tax preparation, had discovered that Daniel was carrying over $200,000 in hidden debt, multiple maxed-out credit cards, personal loans taken out under his name alone, and a tangle of investment accounts that didn't add up to anything resembling the financial picture Daniel had always presented. For years, Daniel had postured as the successful, stable provider, criticizing Belle for not contributing, while secretly drowning in debt he'd never once mentioned. 2 days later, Paige called. Belle almost didn't answer, but something in her, curiosity or perhaps the simple desire to understand exactly how thoroughly she'd been deceived, made her pick up. Paige's voice was shaking. "Belle, I need to tell you something, and I need you to believe I'm not calling to make excuses for myself." She paused. "Daniel has a storage unit. I found the key by accident. I went to see what was inside, and Belle, there's so much in there. Financial documents, contracts, emails, photos, records with your name on them. I think he's been planning something. I think he's been lying to both of us." Belle wrote down the address without a word. The storage unit sat in a nondescript facility on the edge of town, and Belle stood in front of Unit 214 for a long moment before turning the key Paige had given her. Inside, stacked in careful labeled boxes, was a small archive of Daniel's secret life, financial statements she'd never seen, correspondence with people she didn't recognize, and tucked inside a leather notebook near the back, something that made her blood run cold. It was Daniel's plan, written in his own handwriting, dated and detailed like a business strategy, because to Daniel, apparently, that's exactly what it was. The notebook outlined, step by step, how he intended to convince Belle she had no real financial standing of her own, how he would continue hiding his debts throughout the divorce proceedings, how he would push for a rushed settlement before she had time to investigate anything, how he would walk away with the bulk of their marital assets, the house, their savings, everything Belle had actually built. And then, once the dust settled, marry Paige. The affair, Belle realized, sitting on an overturned box in a dim storage unit with her hands trembling, hadn't been the whole betrayal. It had been a single piece of something much larger, much colder, much more calculated than she'd imagined. Flipping further through the notebook, she found repeated references to something called the Mercer account, mentioned alongside numbers that didn't match anything in their joint finances. She photographed every page carefully, then called her accountant the next morning and asked her to look into it. The answer came back within days, and it was worse than Belle expected. Mercer was a private investment partnership, entirely unrelated to Daniel's actual job, and Daniel had been falsely representing himself as a partner with significant holdings in it. Holdings that, on closer inspection, appeared to be built on forged documents and misrepresented assets. It wasn't just marital deception. It looked increasingly like financial fraud. A week later, Belle received a notice from an attorney representing one of Daniel's largest clients. The firm had discovered discrepancies in financial reports Daniel had submitted, discrepancies that pointed toward exactly the kind of fabrication Belle had found evidence of in that storage unit. Daniel, it turned out, was already under investigation, and had been, quietly for weeks, without Belle knowing any of it. Belle forwarded everything to her own attorney, the notebook, the storage unit photographs, the accountant's findings on the hidden debt, and the Mercer account fraud. Her attorney, a sharp, unflappable woman named Ms. Alvarez, reviewed it all with the calm satisfaction of someone who rarely got handed a case this thoroughly documented. "This changes everything," Ms. Alvarez told her. "He was counting on you not looking too closely. You looked." When Daniel pushed for a quick, quiet settlement, eager, Belle now understood, to finalize things before his fraud investigation caught up with him, Belle refused. Her attorney demanded complete financial disclosure from Daniel as part of the proceedings, a demand Daniel fought against for exactly as long as it took the court to compel it. Once the disclosure came through, everything he had hidden came pouring into the light. The debts, the false claims, the fabricated Mercer holdings, all of it laid bare in black and white before a judge who did not look favorably on financial dishonesty during divorce proceedings. Daniel's plan to leave Belle financially devastated collapsed entirely, undone by his own paper trail. He came to her one afternoon, unannounced, holding a bouquet of grocery store flowers, wearing the same practiced, hopeful expression he used to wear when he wanted something and expected to get it without much resistance. "Belle, can we talk? I think we can work this out without lawyers making it messier than it needs to be." Belle didn't invite him in. She simply held up her phone, showing him a photograph of a single page from his own notebook. His handwriting, his plan, his own words describing exactly how he intended to deceive her. Daniel's face went pale. The flowers hung forgotten at his side. "Where did you—" "It doesn't matter where," Belle said quietly. "It matters that I have it, all of it." Within days, his lawyers were calling him more urgently than he was calling Belle. His largest client formally terminated their contract once the fraud allegations became public within their industry circles. Loan investigations opened. The financial fraud inquiry expanded well beyond what Belle had initially uncovered, pulling in years of misrepresented dealings Daniel had apparently been managing long before he'd ever thought to divorce her. The divorce settlement that followed looked nothing like what Daniel had planned in that leather notebook. Instead of walking away with the house, the savings, and a clean break to build a new life with Paige, Daniel left the marriage with mounting legal fees, an active fraud investigation, and a mountain of debt that was, at last, entirely and undeniably his own to answer for. Belle kept her home. She kept her business. She kept the financial security she had quietly built for years, entirely on her own terms. Paige left Daniel not long after the fraud investigation became public, the relationship apparently unable to survive. Contact with what Daniel actually was once the affair's initial excitement wore off. She reached out to Belle one final time, her voice small over the phone. "I know I don't deserve it," Paige said, "but I am sorry for all of it. You were my best friend, and I threw that away for someone who was using both of us." Belle listened to the apology in full. She believed even that it was sincere. But sincerity and repair were not always the same thing. "I accept your apology," Belle told her. But I'm not going to pretend we can go back to what we were. Some things, once broken, don't rebuild the way they were before. I wish you well, Paige. I mean that. But I don't think we'll be friends again. It wasn't cruelty. It was simply the clear-eyed boundary of a woman who had learned, expensively, what trust was actually worth, and who no longer intended to hand it out carelessly. A year later, Belle's consulting business had grown even further, new clients drawn in by a reputation for sharp, unflappable strategic thinking that, as it turned out, had been forged in the exact crucible of the year she'd just survived. Her daughter was thriving, adjusting well to the quieter, steadier rhythm of their new life together, a home now defined by honesty rather than performance. Belle kept the house Daniel had once assumed he'd take from her. She kept her peace. She kept her independence, the kind she now understood she had actually possessed all along, long before Daniel ever sat down at that breakfast table and told her she wasn't enough. She thought some mornings, buttering toast in the same kitchen where it had all fallen apart, about how easily people underestimated quiet strength, how Daniel had spent 9 years assuming that a woman who cooked breakfast and drove carpool couldn't possibly be the one actually holding financial security in her own 2 hands. She thought about how betrayal, however painful in the moment, had a strange way of finally revealing the truth about people, stripping away the performances everyone had been putting on for each other. She had learned that financial independence wasn't just about money, it was about power. Quiet, steady, unshakable power that no one could take from her because no one else had ever fully understood she had it in the first place. She had learned that preparation, patience, and calm attention would always outlast manipulation dressed up as confidence. And she had learned, most importantly, that the best response to people who tried to destroy you wasn't rage or revenge or dramatic confrontation. It was simply living well, on her own terms, long after they were gone.